everybody, it's Glenda with Fralins and Friends. You're the friends. I'm the Fralin, one of the Fralins. Joe's part of it. Anyway, he's in there finishing up his supper. I have overfilled myself. So, I did some work this last day or two to see if I could get this looking a little bit better. And I'm gonna let you see, because I will be painting on it more tonight. Okay, turn it toward you so you can see. Okay, I redid the horses, and what I did a little bit, it doesn't really, may not be that apparent, but what I did was I used a Sharpie to get the outline of the horses so that their snouts didn't look quite so messy and big like they're not. And stuff. They're not meant, they're meant more to be a silhouette or yeah. Anyway, so, and working with the legs, I always have to remind myself on the back legs. But yes, that's what I did. I went ahead and I put in the trail, because it was traveled enough, I'm sure that. So, in order to make it visible, I did the harnesses in gray. So, tonight we're going to move on with this. And I'm going to tell you another story of things that happened when people were in these wagon trains. This is one story of a particularly bad event, but mostly I'm going to be painting in ghosts. That's going to be tonight's little feature. But I'm going to work on these wheels just a little, because I see that they do need work. When I put the path in, I kind of covered up some of the spokes and stuff on these wheels. And they need to show. These wooden wheels, when they would break down, if they could, they'd fix them. But, and this thing turned out kind of square. Let's see if we can round it out a bit. Let's get it round. There we go. Generally, they would ride, the wagon would ride down lower on those wheels than what I showed here, but it depends on the load, I guess, and the way it's built. I mean, a lot of them were probably built by the people who were going to be traveling. I imagine buying them was pretty expensive. You know, back in those times. So, I hope that looks better. And I did silhouette the drivers, and I think I got them silhouetted a little bit better. Alright, now, there were a lot of things through. I already got black and I got brown. White. There were a lot of things through all those years of traveling that caused death. I mean, there was disease. There was, I mean, sometimes a disease could take out maybe even half or a whole party. But Weather was another one. Weather was a significant problem. But also there were bandits. I mean, yes, there were Native Americans who did rise up against them, but not as many as what the movies portray. Excuse me, my taco wants to talk. So I'm going to put some of these ghosts are going to be black. And they're going to be the nasty bad ghosts. And I'm going to put quite a few ghosts in here. And then the good ghosts, or the white ones, I will put a few graves, but they could have graves peppered all over. I mean, we have no idea when we're driving over a grave, maybe, or stepping on one from back in those days. I suppose there's a lot of houses. We know there's highways that have been built on top of graves. Especially, well, we do know that the graves of former slaves down south, that some of those, they weren't allowed to mark the graves, so they would make those, what they call ugly jugs. And there's a guy down there who makes replicas of those. But I've made a couple for the fun of it. But that's how they would mark the graves of their ones they lost. But you know, they're made out of probably clay made from mud and straw, and then molded and so. But those would get destroyed after a while, and then a lot of those places where those graves were, they would just be trampled over, or they would be built over. But there was one back in one party called the Donner Party. And this was back in like 1846 or 7, somewhere in that. They got stranded in the mountains. They were late on getting to that point. They got caught in snowstorms in the mountains, and it was just, they couldn't even get through the passes. They were stuck there. And after a while, it got to where they were dying of starvation, and there were, I'm sure, a lot of infighting and stuff like that. And so what happened over those months, I believe there'd been another part of the party that did go on that they didn't let things slow them up so much, that did get across into Oregon or California. But what happened with the ones that were caught and stranded in the mountains, I'm thinking it was these Sierras. These ghosts, the good ghosts, or the white ones, they wish they could go on with the wagon trains, but they're kind of stuck where they are. But they kind of, in this case, have taken on a job of protecting the wagons from these nasty the black ghosts. I mean, movies, well, they still do to some point, but used to, black hats were the bad guys, white hats were the good guys. Now I think it's smokers are the bad guys. I don't know. They've come up with all different kinds of things. And I will put more graves in. But the Donner Party started getting to the point where they were starving and dying from exposure and from starvation. And that ended up leading to cannibalism. I don't know how many survived. I don't think it was a lot. But the only way they did survive was through cannibalism. And it's a terrible thing to think about. I mean, it's just absolutely terrible to think about that. But it happened. Now, the Civil War is one that I've always kind of wondered about, because it didn't go past a certain Western point, at least not as far as direct involvement. But I did hear that that the Union or somebody had in California, they had them make, what am I doing? Oh, I'm making a grave. They were making weapons for the Union Army. I don't know, that really doesn't make a lot of sense to me, because California is so far off. So I don't know how accurate that was. You know, if you think about, so many people died along the way on those wagon trains, and generally they were just buried where they died, and somebody would maybe put up a cross. I don't know how often that actually happened. They were possibly had been, I'm going to let that dry, and then I'm going to try and make a little more sophisticated grave on this one. Because, I mean, you know, different times, different ages. But this one I'm going to make a little more sophisticated. I'll put white on the inside. I'm just outlining it with that. I'm going to let that part dry. So, I mean, our house, half of our town could be built on top of old graves. Nobody really knows where all of them are at. And the only way I think that possibly could be known is through journals and those kind of records, if they kept them. So I'm going to turn this around and let you see right now what we got going. That's it for now. I don't want to make too many ghosts. I want to get some graves in. And I think we might just finish this thing tonight. I mean, you know, in certain places, there's a lot of limestone. So it wasn't hard. There is of course, this was much later. It was probably early 1900s. Down in the Flint Hills, where I grew up, along the river road on the west, there is a hill, it's called Sawyer Hill. And I was only up there once. And unfortunately, there was a lot of vandalism. But there is, the family used to come back. They had gone, I guess it might have been much earlier than what I thought. They had gone to, most of them went to Oklahoma during the land rush. And they would come back every year to see this little girl's grave. And it was her father, when she died, as a child, I don't think she was very old. From what I understand, she wasn't very old at all. I got white. But they would come back to see her grave. He had carved, I mean, he had surrounded it with limestone blocks, which were very frequently chiseled by people who built there. And, I mean, those were rock. They weren't bricks that are made out of clay and stuff. It's a Halloween. We're doing this for Halloween, so it's the whole ghost story thing. But, you know, I want to include a little history with it, since I've put them out on the prairie. Okay, I am going to put one raised grave on here. I understand, there again, you go a lot by movies, and they're not always accurate, but I think some tribes did probably bury their dead above ground, so we're going to do one above ground grave. They would have had a whole cemetery full of them. They buried them high to keep... I don't know what more to do tonight. I think this will probably be the end of this particular painting. It's made for Halloween, but that doesn't mean I don't want it to look good. I do. But here we are. The ghosts of the prairie. And so I've got the good ghosts blocking the bad ghosts. There were robbers, there were all kinds of bad guys. What I might do next is, it's thought that the inspiration from that came from a real person by the name of Vlad Dracul, and he was known as Vlad the Impaler. He was a European, but I mean, there was a lot of impaling back then, but he made a big practice of it, I guess. I mean, I don't believe in ghosts. I believe we all have a spirit, and that spirit has somewhere to go when we die, but, or a soul. But I don't think they hang around Earth. I don't believe in zombies either, but they're fun for Halloween. So, I hope you enjoyed this painting. There we go. We've got one raised grave. Although we know that most of the time they were very good about making a whole graveyard, not just... Because, I mean, they had their places... Someday we'll have to get into that, but I'm not going to get a whole lot into it tonight. But they did have their winter places a lot of times, and their summer places. That was just, you know, some tribes did anyway, not all, but... Anyway, I love you all. Thank you for being with us. I love all of you. Take care of yourselves. Here's your smile and wave. Go share it when it's daylight. And we will see you again tomorrow. And I'll start something different. I thought this would take another day, but obviously not. So have a good one. I'll see you tomorrow. Good night.